Sirisha.
Anyone audible?
Prabhuji, you just read, this is very new. Actually, the whole creation, dissolution of the whole creation, the living entity remains unconscious for millions of years, many millions of years. Can you please explain that, Prabhu? I mean, it's not like immediate. I mean, not immediate means.
Yeah, Bhadri, actually, this is in relationship to the total dissolution of creation the when the living entity actually goes to the body of Mahavishnu, when the total annihilation takes place, when all the universes go back in the body of Mahavishnu, that time the living entity sleeps. Sorry. So the living entity has, you know, when the total dissolution takes place, the living entity actually goes to the body of Mahavishnu. And as we have discussed what is the duration of Lord Brahma, that much duration Brahma also goes to sleep, because Krishna, Lord Mahavishnu's breathing period, exhalation and inhalation are the same duration. So when the Supreme Lord exhales, that is the duration of Lord Brahma's life. But when he inhales, that is when all the Brahmas along with their universes and all the living entities enter into his body. So whatever the duration of Lord Brahma, for that much duration, again, all the living entities go into the body of Mahavishnu and they sleep. They sleep in the mystic slumber for a long, long time.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So in 363 verse, it was said like super soul awakens and reminds him of the desires. So is it like super soul reminds? I thought like it's only soul only like conscious of its desires and it acts on the desires. Is it super soul awakens?
The super soul is actually, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita also, is a source of remembrance. Matah smritir jnanam apohanam cha. So this remembrance, this forgetfulness and knowledge, everything comes by the dint of Paramatma, the super soul who is residing next to the living entity. So when the living entity awakens also, he will not have ability to remember anything until unless Krishna reminds him in the form of Paramatma.
Okay, Prabhu, yeah, I think that's helpful. I think Bhagavad Matta Smriti. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, I have one more question. If everybody's turn over, I'll ask Prabhu.
Sure.
Prabhuji, Narottam Vinatas here, Prabhuji. One question here. It may be some trivial, but just want to confirm. So, Karnadaksha Vishnu is outside the material universe. And he is outside from him, and everything emanates. So, he is outside the purview of the material universe.
Yes.
But when he enters the material universe as Garbhodaksha Vishnu, so can we consider only Karnadaksha Vishnu as aloof or outside of the material universe, and Garbhodaksha Vishnu and Shivadaksha Vishnu inside the material universe, although they are transcendental but inside the material universe? Is it right understanding?
They are very much inside the material universes, Garbhodaksha Vishnu and Shivodaksha Vishnu, but they are not touched by the material nature.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
They still remain untouched by the material nature.
Okay, yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dhanavad Pranam. So, Prabhu, when this annihilation happens, right, like all the universes will be annihilated when the Lord Vishnu inhales and exhales, right? So, during that time, when even the living entities will be gone, right? So, when they come back, right, the karma, what they have generated so far, still will be as it is, or it will be like completely fresh start?
No, the karmas will still remain as it is. And therefore, when the creation begins afresh, you see some living entities will still become the trees, creepers, right? All the species of life comes into existence simultaneously.
Oh, okay, right.
By the dint of their karma. whatever and wherever they left it, it'll be there only.
Okay, got it. Prabhuji. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hari Bol Madhani.
How to get rid of the bad karma, Prabhuji?
Actually, a devotee doesn't worry so much of the good and bad karma, but simply by the process of devotional service, one can burn all the karma, whether good or bad. Both can be burned. Not only bad karma, but even good karma can be burned by the dint of devotional service. In fact, the example is given in this regard is just like every karma or every activity that we perform, it takes the form of a seed. And if you take the seeds and roast them into oil or ghee, those seeds will never ever germinate again. No matter how much water or facilities you provide for those seeds to germinate, they will never germinate. They will never fructify. Similarly, a living entity who has heaps and heaps of karma, whether good or bad, can burn all those karma simply by the dint of devotional service. And Prabhupada quotes this verse from Puranas, I believe Vishnu Puran, in the 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Apraradham phalam papam kutam bijam phalonmukham. There are different kinds of sinful reactions. There could be aprarabdha. I mean, that is something that is not yet enjoyed by the person who has committed the crime. So a person who has committed the crime but is not yet detected, his karma is called aprarabdha. Aprarabdham phalam papam. Then kutam, bijam, phalonmukham. There are different stages. Kuta means it is in a very dormant stage. It has not yet formed the seed also. It is there, but it's not yet formed the seed also. Then bijam means the seed is already formed. Phalonmukham means the seed is already fructified, is almost ready to give the fruit. The person is about to enjoy the reactions of his karma. All these different kinds of sinful reactions are destroyed by a person who is Vishnu Bhakti Rathatmana, a person who is engaged in the bhakti of Lord Vishnu. So devotional service is a very potent and like a burning fire which can destroy all the sinful reactions.
Thank you, Prabhuji. So sinful reactions of only this birth or all the prayer births also, Prabhuji?
Everything. Not only this life, but millions and billions of lifetimes. Everything put together can be destroyed by simply taking to the process of devotional service.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hari Bol.
That means one should be very serious in devotional service.
Yes, definitely. Because there is no other efficient way to get rid of all the karma that we have. Sometimes people think sinful reaction, but even pious activities are equally detrimental to one's spiritual life. So therefore, sometimes you will see that the scriptures you will find when a devotee is situated well, in material life, it is said that he's exhausting the karma. He's exhausting his karma. Not only when a living entity suffers, but even when he enjoys, he's exhausting his karma.
Prabhuji, is it possible to exhaust others' karma?
Others' karma. We can help other people to get relief from their karma, but we cannot suffer or enjoy on their behalf. No. Only in the case of spiritual master or a husband, they can take the reactions of voluntary. They can accept the reactions of their dependents. Like a guru can accept the sinful reactions of a disciple. and husband does accept the sinful reactions of his wife.
So is that true for children also, Prabhuji? They are also dependent.
Children, when they act as disciples, or as obedient students, fully obedient to their parents. I remember, in childhood when we used to touch the feet of our parents or even elderly person, they used to give blessings. You are relieved. That was a blessing they would give. You are relieved. I could never understand what does that mean. Why they're saying you are relieved. So, but that is true. When a subordinate person does play the role of a disciple and accepts a person as superior or guru, the superior person can accept all the reactions, sinful reactions of the person.
So it's about following the instructions of the superiors.
Yes.
It's not based on the love and affection to the subordinates.
No, actually, therefore, you see, in the ancient times, the children were so very much obedient to the parents. The culture is broken now, but that is so conducive for a person to live a happy life, because happy life in the material world is more or less dependent on relievement from the sinful reactions. So when children used to touch the feet of their parent, the parents used to assume the sinful reactions. It was a culture. At least when I grew up, we had the culture of touching the feet of the superiors. And therefore, if you see, at least in our generation, I saw most of the people would have very stable and more or less reasonably happy life. Not happy like nowadays people aspire for, the unlimited supply of sense enjoyment. Not that kind of life. People used to have very reasonably stable and happy life, because they used to have blessings of their superiors. The superiors would accept the reactions of their karma.
Thank you,
But
Prabhuji.
but nowadays, most of the parents also don't train their children. It's an unfortunate thing. And even if you try to train children, somehow they are not so receptive nowadays, to accept the blessings. But in Mahabharata, there is a proverb when Bhishma Dev is actually instructing Duryodhana. He said, "My dear son, if you offer obeisances to anyone, the natural result of that will be you will get blessings." Because Duryodhana was very arrogant. He said, if you bow down to anyone for blessings, if you offer anyone pranam, the natural consequence will be blessings.
You understand, bro? Like when we take the sins of the subordinates when they are submissive, like the sinful tendencies will be reduced in that person, or the pushings will be reduced in that sense, or
The sinful tendencies are not reduced, but sinful tendencies are only reduced or uprooted actually by the process of devotional service. Everything else only relieves a person from sinful reactions. This is the verdict of Bhagavatam. Now, the conversation between Shukadeva Goswami and Parikshit Maharaj. Prabhupada quotes that's also in Upadeshamrita.
yes.
So, until a person takes to the process of worshipping Vishnu, there is no question of relievement from the sinful reactions, tendencies to commit sinful activities. So that will be only destroyed by devotional service.
Yes, I understand. Thank you. Thanks, Pastor.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Prabhuji, I have one question. Is it okay, Prabhuji?
Yes, Madhvi, go ahead.
Prabhuji, so it's not related to this question, but about karma, if you're going to the Ganga river or Yamuna or Saraswati river, if you take the bath, that all the sins will go, or the all sins will not go, Prabhuji, if you're taking the bath from that Gangas and Manasara or all that things. Sorry, Prabhuji, it's a very silly question, but just I want to clarify that one.
No, it's not silly question. It's a very nice question. It reminded me of the same question was asked by Mother Parvati from Lord Shiva. So it reminded me of that conversation. So once Mother Parvati asked the same question from Lord Shiva, that so many people are coming here to Triveni Sangam, you know, and where Ganga, Yamuna, and Saraswati meet in Prayag. So she said, is it that everyone who comes to take bath gets relief from the sinful reactions? And Lord Shiva said, anyone who believes does become free from all the sinful reactions. She said, what do you mean? He said, let's see. Let's do an experiment. So Lord Shiva took the form of a Brahman with leprosy, old Brahmana with having leprosy all over his body. And you know, leprosy is a contagious disease. And Parvati became his wife. You know? So they both were standing little far from the bathing ghat, you know, in Triveni Sangam, and she was crying. So people were passing by, you know, they were going to the bathing ghat to take bath. And she said, you know, my husband has leprosy, but some Siddha Purusha told that a person who is liberated comes and embraces my husband will be relieved from the leprosy. So a person who is relieved from all the sins and is liberated, he comes and embraces my husband. So my husband will be free from leprosy. So she was asking, since you are going to take bath in Triveni Sangam, you will be freed from all the sins. He said, yeah, I'll be freed. So can you come and embrace my husband? This person will become hesitant. He said, okay, I'll come and embrace. But every person went that road. After taking bath, they would not come back from that way. They will go some other way. So finally, one boy came, a young boy. She said, you know, if you after taking bath can come and embrace my husband. He said, yes. So immediately he went, took bath, and came back and embraced Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva looked at Parvati, said, he is liberated. So anyone who goes to take bath in the holy places, if he's simply taking bath but doesn't have any faith, the Ganges water will still act, but will not be to the extent a person who has complete faith in it. Like same thing when we go in front of deities, some people who are atheistic, who think, oh, it's just a piece of stone, you know, and carved in the form of a statue or human-like form, and these fools are worshipping it. So then the Lord also reciprocates accordingly. He behaved like a statue, stone statue to such a person. If a thief come to the temple, he thinks, oh, there's so much nice jewelry put on in the statue. If I can steal it, so the Lord also, you know, reciprocates accordingly. You know. But when a devotee comes in front of the deities, then Krishna reciprocates accordingly. So same thing in case of you know, visiting the holy places and taking bath in them. Just as Krishna says, Yatha ye yatha mam prapadyante. Similarly, the holy dham, which is also non-different from the Lord, and Mother Ganga, or all the holy rivers, they are actually non-different in one way. We were discussing other day actually. When Monday we were discussing, right? Mother Ganga is actually considered liquid Brahman, non-different from the body of Lord Krishna. So they will also reciprocate based on the person's faith in them.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Rishi, I have a small question, follow-up question on that. So, if a person who has faith in the sense, has faith, oh, I had taken dip in the Sangam, and everything fully cleaned, my slate is clean. Well, let's go back again, do something again, you know, try to repeat the process, or doing simple reaction. But he has faith, everything is gone, and my fully is gone, and it's a fresh start. I will now do new simple activities. So even though, so when you say faith, what does it mean? So faith can have, people can have faith that everything is gone. I know everything is gone, but I want to go. But the sinful proclivity won't go, right? So even though the sinful proclivity is there, but the faith is there that everything is gone, but the proclivity is not gone. The sinful tendency is not gone. Will still be a person with fear of
The
sins.
person who has faith, will not actually be what do you call, of that nature, that he will repeatedly do the same thing. Okay. It's just like a person who is in knowledge that if I touch the fire, it will burn me, will not repeatedly put the hand in the fire. If a person is putting hand repeatedly in the fire in spite of experiencing, that means the person is foolish. He, even if he has faith, he's forgetful of the experience. So in one way, you cannot say that person actually has any faith, because the person who has faith and remembers the experience from the past will not put the hand in the fire. So a person who is repeatedly committing the sins is more or less an atheist, a faithless person.
Okay, bro. Thank you so much.
Because the person who is faithful, he knows that committing sinful activities will bring the hellish suffering at the hands of the agents of Yamaraj. A person who commits sinful activities, fearlessly again and again, that means he doesn't even have faith that he's going to be punished for that.
Okay, bro. Thank you so much.
Really.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavats Pranam.
Haribol Mataji, Dhanat.
Prabhuji, as per my understanding, Chit, I know, is the original, like the pure consciousness, and while Chitta is the consciousness when we are in this body. What differentiates like so your soul versus my soul? Is it Chitta? That's my first question. And second question is, when you said after dissolution we all merge into Vishnu, into Krishna, is it Chitta that carries my karma? Sorry, I just want to understand that part, like what carries my karma, like when I take birth again, and what differentiates one soul from the other soul. Like Krishna says, each soul is unique.
Mind is a material element, Mataji. The material element. And the way mind functions is, as the Upanishads give the example, that mind is like the reins. The senses are like horses and mind is like the reins. So the only function that mind does is directs the senses. Like the reins direct the horses, similarly the function of mind is to direct the senses. And more precisely, how the mind does it is explained, that does in two ways, sankalpa and vikalpa. So mind has only two functions by which he controls all the senses, is through sankalpa and vikalpa. Sankalpa means determination. I want to enjoy in this particular way. And all the senses will be forced to work in that direction because the mind made sankalpa. And then vikalpa means becoming detached. No, I don't want to do this thing. So mind has mainly these two functions of sankalpa and vikalpa. And through these two, sankalpa and vikalpa, the mind actually controls the senses. Okay. But as far as the remembrance is concerned, that, as we discussed before also, is by the mercy of Paramatma, by the mercy of Vishnu. So it is Lord Krishna who actually reminds the living entity of what they were, where they left their, karmic backlog when the previous annihilation took place. And moreover, when the annihilation takes place, all the material elements are amalgamated. So there is again only, one subtle element which is called total material energy that is left. So there is no mind when the living entities and all the material nature enters into the body of Mahavishnu. So living entities enter into the body of Mahavishnu as pure spirit soul.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Prabhu. I think that explained me. So, but consciousness is a function of soul, right? Consciousness.
Yes, consciousness is the symptom of the soul.
Okay, okay, okay. That was very helpful. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Prabhuji.
Yeah, Madhuri, go ahead.
Prabhuji, I have a couple of questions. Prabhuji, is it okay to ask? Because is it lengthy discussions? I mean, I'm just asking because while you are explaining, I'm getting more questions. Is it okay to ask, Prabhu?
Please go ahead.
So, Prabhuji, while you are saying about the faith, while Anuradha Mataji asking about, and you said one pastime of faith, about having faith, belief, like belief means it's like mind's job, right, Prabhu? Even if now in my condition state, I want to believe Krishna by hearing from all of you, but mind's job is mind is doing more job. So, for example, like. I recently heard from you like Shaligram Sheila Gandhaki River. That is the first time in my life I'm hearing. Yesterday I saw the video. I really want to believe, but it's unbelievable for me. The prince on the rocks comes from Vishnu's body. I mean, my mind is saying maybe somebody will think. I mean, somebody will. How can we believe? How can we handle that? Actually, I really want to believe, but I'm unbelievable some things. Do you understand what I'm saying, Prabhu?
Yes, Mataji. So it's just a matter of experiences to develop the faith. Like if I told someone that even if you don't have any money, this is a statement from Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj makes a statement. He says, even if a person is poverty stricken, doesn't have any money, but he has a terminal disease, okay, no doctor, he cannot afford a doctor, no medicine he can afford, yet if Krishna gives him protection, the person will survive. On the other hand, if a person is rich, filthy rich, he has doctors, he has medication, everything is at his disposal, Krishna doesn't give him protection, he will die. Okay. Now, in contrast to this, if you see if a person is poor, doesn't have money, and he or she has a terminal disease, no cure is available in the medical science, can that person survive? Person is poor, doesn't have money to even spend on the treatment, and there is no treatment in the medical science about that disease. Can that person survive?
No.
If I say Krishna gives him protection, the person will survive. Can you believe that? The person has terminal disease.
No, Prabhu, because we are seeing, I mean, I definitely know we have defects, I mean, but we are seeing so many examples, right? I mean, yeah, I'm so sorry to say,
But to tell you, I have seen such example in my life. Even before coming to Krishna consciousness, I saw example where a person, a lady had a terminal disease. She was a sister of a very good friend of mine, from school days, and she had a terminal disease. The terminal disease, even till this day, has no cure. She had thalassemia. People think only cancer and AIDS, but thalassemia has no cure even till this day. Patient must die within 4 or 5 years. She had that disease, and they were very poor. They had no money. They couldn't even afford to give her blood every month. Somehow that they were managing. But that girl got cured of the disease. She is healthy and still surviving. The doctor who was treating her was shocked to see her completely cured. No. So, I mean, I told this instance to one of our doctor devotees. He refused to even believe me. He said, "This is bogus. I cannot accept you." Something that I personally saw. So, faith is actually more or less based on our experiences. And of course, that Shraddha is also nothing but the faith, or Shraddha is nothing but blessings of the Lord. To the degree we take shelter of process of devotional service, to that degree Krishna provides us with faith or Shraddha. So, and that Shraddha actually becomes more and more stronger by the experiences that we experience in Krishna consciousness. So, even simply by hearing the experience of others, you can actually imbibe or develop faith. Even though we may not have experience, but if we keep hearing from people who have faith, we actually develop the faith. So the more we associate with people of the qualities that we aspire for, those qualities we develop. It's just like, if you associate with an atheist for a long time, it's just a matter of time you will also become an atheist. If you associate with a drunkard on daily basis, it's just a matter of time that you will actually become habituated of drinking. So developing virtues or developing faults is just matter of also associating. So in Krishna consciousness, we associate with Krishna through hearing the message of Krishna. So then we develop also faith in all the subject matter that we are hearing about Krishna. I hope that helps, Mataji.
Yes, Prabhuji, very helpful. Yes, Prabhuji. And I have one more question, two more questions. Like, as you said, the karma is as it is after the inhalation, and it will start as it is. It's not a fresh start. Then how Darwin's theory came up? Like the man comes from an animal. You said like the trees. I mean, that's why you see the creation with different things like lower things and people and everything, right? Because of their karma, they start their again. So how this previously there is no human being, and after the
Mataji, I think Prabhu dropped off.
No, Mataji, no problem. I'm here.
Okay, yeah, sure, Prabhu.
so how this Darwin's theory came out, and everybody believed that Prabhuji, how that was prominent. I mean, yeah.
Mati, Darwin's theory is more or less speculation or concoction. It's not that there's any truth in it. I remember Atmat Prabhu used to make mock of all such theories, which is actually based on the reality. So you see, all the scientists, modern scientists that we have who come up with all these theories, they are mostly the people who are drunkards, woman hunters. They don't even follow any principles of cleanliness. And most of the time, when they are actually doing research, they are intoxicated. They are drunkards. So, their so-called research, which is propagated by the people with vested interest, is nothing but their hallucinations. Because they don't follow any principles of Shuchi, their intelligence and their mind are polluted. And actually, since they are atheist also by nature, according to Lord Ramachandra, in his instructions to Jabalika, he says a person who is atheist, who rejects the Vedas, his opinion is completely polluted, and a sane person should never accept their opinion, in any way. And therefore, you see, Prabhupada was so rigid. He would just shoot down or just reject at the very first sentence. He would just reject it. He would never accept such theories.
Sure, Prabhuji. Recently, we got discussion with my parents. Somehow they are reading Bhagavad Gita. They started my mom. So I didn't convince them. I didn't convince, and I said, if it is true, then how come still there are monkeys alive? Because every monkey has a human take the human form. Like, how still the monkey is still alive? So it's not like that. I told like that, but yeah.
Yeah. And of course, if somebody is interested in scientific way of understanding it, of course, I think your parents may not be, but in case, if children or the youngster ask this question, there is a beautiful book written by, Dutkarma Prabhu, one of Prabhupada disciple. It's called Forbidden Archaeology. That book has such beautiful, it's actually such a beautiful compilation. Just to give you a gist, like he gives a couple of examples. If you're talking about this Darwin's theory, for example, according to Darwin's theory, the life actually started from single cell and it got multiplied into, most complicated mechanism like in a human body or any other forms we have. Okay, it all started with a single cell. So from single cell, it became, multiplied, and became a huge form like elephant or human beings. So he was saying, it's just like if I told you, you have motorcycle, you're driving the motorcycle, okay? And while driving motorcycle, when the motorcycle is running, it's not even stopped, it's running, and somebody is driving the motorcycle, you throw some nut bolts on it and it becomes car. Does it happen in real life? And how ridiculous it looks when you speak like this, that okay, the motorcycle was running, somebody threw some tin sheet and some nut bolts on it, it became car.
Yes.
That is the proposition this Darwin's theory is. Does it makes any sense from any point of view? From scientific point of view, it doesn't make any sense. Only fools, who pass out as scientists will actually be enlivened by hearing such theory. But from scientific point of view, it doesn't make any sense.
Sure, Prabhuji. Yes, definitely.
And of course, I remember when we grew up in the beginning days of our Krishna consciousness, we had so many articles. Especially, I remember spiritual scientists, we used to have a magazine published from Chapati Temple. We had so many articles written on that. Especially, I remember also one article had come in, I believe, in BTG, related to eyes retina. There's a scientific explanation given between how the eyes retina functions and how, according to Darwin's theory, this cannot be the case. This such a complicated mechanism of eyes retina can come out just by an accident, evolving through different species of life.
So there is a book called Life Comes from Life by Prabhupada, and that book completely refutes the Darwin theory.
Yeah.
Science also starts on assumptions, right, Prabhu? Science also, like there is they assume certain things and they build logic on top of that.
Yes, that's true. I mean, if you read that book, as Angadibru said, science, life comes from life. All these arguments Prabhupada actually puts together. Actually, that whole book is compilation of such arguments.
I think in our group also there were a couple of posts regarding to this few months back about Darwin's thing. If you search Mataji, you'll get on the same lines, whatever Prabhu said.
Sure, Prabhuji. Sure, Mataji. And one more question while we are reading today, like annihilation and everything cosmic thing, Prabhu. Like Brahma is doing his own job. How can these demigods, which acts these demigods, some demigods leads us to fall down, Prabhu, because they are doing their job, and as we heard that not everyone goes to Goloka Vrindavan. Some may be fall down, some may further progress. Which acts leads them to fall down, Prabhu?
the acts of um, the only act that make a living entity fall down in the material world is the misuse of their free will. We all have free will, you know? So nobody else can actually make us fall down. You know, sometimes you will hear that, Brihaspati, like in Bhagavatam it comes, Brihaspati performed some yajna, and by the dint of that yajna, the sons of Raji fell down and Indra killed them all. You hear such narrations, but actually speaking, nobody can fall down by the efforts of others. A person simply, and Krishna concludes this in a very beautiful statement in Bhagavad Gita. Na kartritum na karmani lokasya srijate prabhu. Na kartritum. Nobody actually can induce anyone to act in a particular way. Lokasya srijate. Nobody can actually induce others to perform any particular action. People simply act out of their swabhav, the nature that they have imbibed through the three moods of material nature. They act according to that. So if Brihaspati is performing yajna and the sons of Raji get affected and become sinful, that means because they already had those tendencies. And by performance of this yajna, those tendencies surfaced up.
Sure, Prabhuji. I'm just thinking like Brahma is always doing Vedas. He always in that mood, and he always do chant the Vedas. How can those those demigods, which acts them? I mean, not only Brahma, but they are devotees, as you said so many times. So how can they fall down? That's what I'm thinking, Prabhu. Yeah.
So Mataji, that's what I said. The fall down is only nothing but misuse of free will. When a living entity misuses his free will, that is considered fall down. Nothing else is actually in real sense fall down. Fall down means when a living entity ends up in misusing his free will. Instead of serving Krishna, he engages in some activities which are displeasing Krishna.
Sure, Prabhuji. And one last question. I'm so sorry, Prabhuji, today. How can a husband take their wife's sinful acts, Prabhuji? As you said, spiritual master, we understand, but how the husband will take care by saying it, or how it really practically it goes?
At the time of marriage, Mataji, the sinful reactions of the wife are transferred to the husband.
After marriage, if the wife do sinful.
At the time of marriage, it is transferred to the husband.
No problem.
And it remains with the husband only if the wife remains chaste and faithful to the husband. If the wife leaves the husband or becomes unchaste, then the reactions goes back to the woman. Back.
Oh my God. Okay, Prabhuji. Thank you so much, Hare Krishna.
And that is the reason why after marriage they always say, it's a saying in English, but that's actually there's a truth in it, that the wife becomes the better half. She's better half because her sins are transferred to the husband. So husband has his own pile of sins and he has sins of his wife. And at the time of marriage, half of the pious credits of the husband are transferred to the wife. So she has her own pious credits and she has her husband's 50% as well. So in terms of piety, she is better off. In the terms of sinful reactions, she is better off. So therefore, she becomes a better half.
So, what is the difference between disobedient and unchaste? Because they seem similar words.
The disobedience is also a form of unchastity, because the wife is supposed to be obedient to the husband, but Unchastity could mean that the wife actually leaves the husband and goes with some other man. So that is called unchaste behavior. Okay. But disobedience means the wife deliberately disregards the instructions of husband. Okay. Thank you. Really. So I think
I have one more question, but maybe Lepu, I can ask tomorrow or next time, Prabhu.
Go ahead, Prabhu. It's anyway 9:42. We can close at 9:45.
Yeah, Prabhu. So when you said, I was thinking about what is about mind, about sankalpa and vikalpa. You said mind says, "Oh, I want to do this, so I'm going to direct the senses to do." But so, what is the desire? I mean, the desire actually comes from the soul. The mind acts kind of a bridge between the external and the soul. The external, the senses, and the soul. It's like a medium which helps execute the desires of the soul. The soul has a desire, goes in misuse of free will, as you said, right? So how can you say when mind says, "Oh, I have to do it"? It's as if mind has its own desires of doing something. Can you confirm?
It works in this way. The soul is full of consciousness. Soul can have the desires, but there is a layer of false ego which covers the soul. So soul is by nature Satchit Ananda, but this false ego makes the soul believe that the living entity is this body. Okay. So by the dint of this false ego, there is a sense of false identity that I am this body. And because there's the false sense of identity, the mind has desires. Right? We say sankalpa, vikalpa is nothing but, desires.
The mind has the desires, of the soul actually resists, because soul has desires to.
Soul has desires, but because it is filtered through false ego. So the mind actually starts desiring or expressing those desires in terms of bodily concept of life, which is reflected through sankalpa and vikalpa. Okay. So yes, soul has only one desire. I want to enjoy. Anandamaya abhyasa. Soul's only desire is he wants to enjoy, seeking happiness. But because of the false ego, that desire for happiness is actually perceived by the soul differently because of the false ego. So false ego is nothing but influenced by the three modes. A person whose false ego is very much deeply rooted in goodness, he thinks I will enjoy the life by studying, being pious, by following the rules and regulations, like a Brahmanical life. A person whose false ego is very much influenced by the mode of passion, he thinks like a Kshatriya, that I will be happy enjoying life like this. Similarly, a person whose false ego is more tinged with passion and ignorance, he behaves like Vaishya. And a person, Shudra, is nothing but the mode of ignorance, influencing the person's consciousness. So false ego is the filter by which the soul actually starts identifying itself with certain bodily concept of life. And that bodily concept of life bring forth the seeking of enjoyment through that different kinds of sankalpa and vikalpa of the mind. So therefore it appears that the mind is the one who is actually desiring. The desire is coming from the soul, and desire is only one. I want to enjoy, I want to be happy. Anandamaya abhyasa, that's the nature of the soul. But that is reflected because of three modes through the mind in innumerable varieties of enjoyment. A living entity seeking.
Thank you so much.
In the same line, right? I mean, what is the actual contamination of the soul then? If it only has the desire of enjoying, which is the nature of the soul, I'm just wondering, false ego is like a material element, which is coming and covering the soul. So is there any root desire inside the soul which is forcing the souls to identify with the false ego.
So, as I said, the soul has only one desire: I want to enjoy. When the soul wants to enjoy separate from Krishna, I don't want to be with Krishna, I want to enjoy it separately. No, that is the fault of the soul. The soul wants to enjoy separately from Krishna, or wants to take the position of Krishna, and enjoy like Krishna. So that is the fault. And when that fault arises, that way of enjoyment is not possible in the spiritual world. Then the living entity is brought to the material world, and then the whole mechanism is made possible. The whole mechanism is provided for the living entity to try to imitate Krishna by the dint of this false ego or all the material elements, which are the part of the material body. So the living entity actually gets a material body, and false ego is just one of the elements of that material body, to try to enjoy separately from Krishna. So the only contamination the living entity has is the desire to enjoy separately from Krishna. Desire to enjoy is going to be there in every living entity. Even the pure devotees have the desire to enjoy, because that's the nature of the soul. But in the case of contaminated consciousness, the desire is to enjoy separately from Krishna.
I understand, Prabhuji. That means the contamination is already there. False ego is just facilitating the contamination.
False ego is just a facility, because false ego is nothing but, you can say, part of the material body. So material body is actually a facility to fulfill that desire, polluted desire of enjoying separate from Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Really. I think it's pretty late today. Thank you very much, everyone. Mansha Kalpataru.